On this episode of the Mamas con Ganas podcast, I have Trixy Castro, investor and mega entrepreneur. Welcome, Trixy, to our podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I'm delighted that you're here. When I was referred to you and I talked to you for the first time, I was just so amazed by everything that you've accomplished. I've had a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast before, but I think you're like one that really stands out because I mean, you've done so much. We're going to go right into your story so that people understand like why I was so impressed. And I think there's a lot of really good conversation that's going to come out of this that we're going to dive into. But can you tell us a little bit to start with, like where you're from, where you come from, a little bit of your background?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it all plays into who we are and who we, have the ability to become. But yes, no, I come from an incredible family who is extremely loving, and they are just amazing people. My mom came here from Cuba. She came to the United States from Cuba. My father came from Guatemala in Central America, and they met here in the United States, and they both had a hard time. My father was able to get his GED when he came into the US, and he came and started as a dishwasher, which is amazing in New York. My mom made it to probably the 10th or 11th grade in Cuba. And all that to say that they tried really hard, very hardworking people, very loving people. But being an entrepreneur was certainly not in their vocabulary or really in their wheelhouse, I thought, right? But as I grew up and started to see their drive and started to see the lessons that I learned from them, it really was that. So I'll give you an example. When I was 3 years old, my mom decided that she wanted to go out and have this different job. There was an ad in the newspaper, and it was to take care of this woman who was an elderly lady with Alzheimer's disease. And so she was going to go for this interview, and she wanted to improve her life in their 4 hours. And the babysitter doesn't show up. So she's like, ay, Dios mío, what am I going to do? Okay, Trixy, you have to come with me. Mind you, I'm 3. Do not say anything. Be quiet. Be on your best behavior, right? And I was like, okay, but can I wear my party dress? Because then I'll come with you, right? And so I went to the most beautiful house I'd ever been to. It had this gorgeous yard. It had a guest house. It was massive. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to be here. And my mom was having the interview. And I'll never forget at 3, I felt her anxiety. She was doing this. She was nervous. And I remember jumping in and saying, you guys need to hire my mom. And they said, well, really? Why is that? And I said, because I really like your yard. I'll never forget this. And then you get me. And I want to learn what you did to have all of this. Can you imagine at 3 years old? I think she like fainted practically. To make a long story short, they end up giving her the job, and we move into their guest house. So now we're living on the property. So I grew up in a guest house. And I remember when we were moving there, I said, Mom, but why do we live here and they live there? I don't know what answer she gave me, but whatever answer it wasn't sufficient, because I was like, I want that, right? And it was the first moment of exposure that I saw, wow, you can do more, you can have more, right? And to me, I was the happiest kid on earth. We lived there with them until I was 14 years old. And they passed. They were an immigrant family that came from Italy with like $2 in their pocket. Husband started a bank, invested in real estate. How parallel are those paths, right? With my story and what I ended up doing later in life, not realizing these were the things that I had seen. At that moment, my mom far exceeded any entrepreneurial spirit. She showed me exposure, right? She improved our life by showing me and putting me in a different environment. And I have to tell you, so much of that comes into it, right? Because so much of then that burning desire was to create housing for others, to create regional jobs, to create opportunities, to level a playing field of investment opportunities for people so that everyone had opportunities to invest in real estate. So fast forward, I turned 14. Sadly, they had passed, so now we're on our own. We have to go get our own house and do the whole thing. We move. So I try out for the soccer team and for cheer, because I figure I'll make friends this way. Brand new high school, brand new everything. We move the day of the first day of school. And I make both of the teams. I make the soccer team and the cheer squad. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing, except for now each sport, you have to come up with $1,000. So you're talking about, I have to come up with $2,000 in like 8 minutes, in like 10 days, right? Thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? All right, get a job. Well, it turns out at 14, no one will hire you. You need a worker's permit. You need a ride and. So I thought, all right, let me go earn the money. So My sisters, I have two younger sisters, 10 and 11 years younger than myself. They went to an elementary school across the street from my house. So I thought, all right, I'm going to open a company. I didn't tell anyone. I went and I got the old school computer paper with the bubbles on the side from a neighbor. I took my sister's Crayola magic markers and I made business cards, and it was called Trixie's Tutor Time. I marched across the street and I went to the principal and I explained to him that I have this new company, right? And this is what I'm doing. And can he introduce me to some teachers that might be interested in my tutoring services, preferably the second and third graders, as I warmed up and learned this. He paid it forward and gave me a shot. Can you imagine? Here he's got this girl walk in and say, can you do this? He introduces me, true story. Within 30 days, I'm making more cash than both of my parents combined. So now I realize, wow, where there's a will, there's a way, right? So now let me hire my mom to be my driver so I can expand to other schools, right? But the beauty of that was I realized, okay, I can fine tune this model. I can really make it where I'm focusing on the second and third graders, and I can hire the fifth and sixth graders, and I can expand. And I learned to be unstoppable in that moment because I realized, okay, if you want something bad enough, figure out a way to do it, right? And like all I knew at that moment was I need to go understand how money works. So when I'm old enough, I'm going to go get a job at a bank, at a banco, right? Because that's where money is kept. This was my naive thinking. So exactly turned 18, marched into a Wells Fargo and asked them for a job. And they were so kind. They gave me a job as a teller. I was the world's worst teller, the worst, like horrible, because I would talk to the clients. So my line was out the door. I'm sitting there talking and chatting because I'm wanting to understand who these large depositors are. What are they doing? How are they making their money? And I realized it was the gamblers, okay, real estate groups, and tech. Those were the three that I start realizing, okay, these are the larger depositors. Gambling, I could probably figure out how to count cards, not trying to go to jail, so not going to do that. Tech was still very new, right? So real estate it was. I had not put the connection in what I had seen as a child, but the real estate piece felt very comfortable to me. The banking piece felt very comfortable to me, right? So I'm really understanding these groups, and they're going out, and the reason they're at the bank in those days at that time is they're getting wads of cashier's checks in different denominations to be able to go to the courthouse steps to buy these foreclosed homes. So they're buying massive amounts of foreclosed homes outside in front of the courthouse steps with cashier's checks and hiring kids my age to be the runners, right? So I'm thinking, wait a second, there's got to be a better way to use this. I just talked to this tech group over here. They're telling me all the things they're doing. Like, there's got to be a way that you can provide a better opportunity for yourself utilizing leverage, right? Like, why aren't we, Wells Fargo, lending to these groups? If they're doing 15 of these flips a month, they could be doing 25, right? Nope, it didn't exist. Still, till this day, the way that it's structured by Fannie and Freddie guidelines, investors can typically do 10 properties, right? And then it's considered, no, so it gave an opportunity. So I somehow get a meeting with the CEO of Wells Fargo at the time. And I walk in, you have to imagine I'm very young at this point. He thinks I'm there to babysit his kids. He has 5 kids. And I'm like, all right, well, yeah, I can help you with your kids, sure. But like, I'm actually your meeting. And it was the craziest thing. So I walk him through and I said, look, we, Wells Fargo, have this opportunity. It's a niche, da, 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 da. And I described my model that later became Genesis Capital. Okay. And I'm describing it and I'm hearing myself and I'm thinking like, wait a second, if he doesn't get on board, I can go do this. So having stars in my eyes and having had someone give me a shot, that principal at 14, I really thought I could do this, right? So he's so kind. He says to me something along the lines of like, probably, how did you get here? Who gave you this meeting? What I heard was, that's a great idea. Go start your own bank. So that's what I did. So I said, okay, this is amazing. Thank you. I have to turn in my resignation. I'm so sorry, but I really appreciate the time I've had here. Can you imagine? Anyway, so I go out.
Trixie.
At that point, I was 20 years old. I was in college. I was in college. So I'm in college and I'm thinking, I need to learn how to do this and do this well, because I live in a dorm room. Like, who's going to take me seriously, right? I'm in school. And the craziest thing was, he said to me, no, you can stay. You can keep your job at Wells. Don't worry. I understand. I appreciate the disclosure. He gave me a shot, right? I mean, all of these people like that are willing to pay it forward really makes a difference. Because to me, it meant everything that somebody would say, you can keep your job and learn, right? I want to always be that person to provide. I wasn't competing with the bank. I was 20 years old. I was learning. And so I set out to do that. I stayed, as long as I could. I eventually ventured out on my own and started Genesis Capital. And I had a phone and a desk and me. And I'd graduated college at that point, and like, that's great. But I hadn't learned how to build a business. I was a psych and social major, not a business major. And I quickly realized, like, wow, there's something to this business piece. I really enjoy it, but I need to understand how people think and why they think this way and how things influence them, right? I need to understand all of them as a unit. So to make a long story short, I start this company, and I had really taught myself how to go through and understand the deal. So at the beginning, before I was raising money, it was understanding how to originate a loan, process a loan, underwrite a loan, understand the markets, drive it, make sure that, if they say they're putting in windows, or putting in windows, understanding the construction budgets, walking the project, you name it, I did it. So it was a one-woman show. So it was doing that, going through that. I eventually get to the point where I did that for 5 years, really understanding. Today we call it crowdfunding. Back then it was called fractionalized lending. Then I felt comfortable, like, okay, I'm going to open up the doors, make it a real fund, make it a real thing. That's when I opened Genesis Capital, the end of 2007. And that's the company that I later sold to Goldman Sachs. Go figure.
Wow.
So I'm ready to hire a dream team. I'm at I have an older brother who was in the fitness industry at the time. And I was there working out at his gym, and this little redheaded girl, also 14, I was not 14 at that time anymore, walks in, and she asks him for a job. And she says, I would like to work in your kids club. And I intercept and I say, why are you looking for a job? What's going on? And she said, oh, I need to buy a prom dress. I said, a prom dress? Aren't you like 14? She's like, yeah. So, well, where's your mom? Who's this boy? Like, what's happening? Right. I said to her, don't work for my brother, come work for me. I have this real estate lending company. That was my first employee, a 14-year-old, like every child labor law on the planet. Okay. Then she gets the lead of the high school play. We hire her best friend, also child labor. I hire my third employee, who's my nephew, my brother's son, who I pay in gas money. Okay, to go and see all the properties for me. So this is the dream team that later we turned into a company that we were funding over $2 billion a year of loans that we sold to Goldman Sachs. So I am that story. Like, you can make it happen. You absolutely can. I learned all of it. I learned through the hard way. I set out to go raise money, went to Wall Street by myself, ended up having Oak Tree Capital out of downtown give me my first 250 million in equity. We levered that. So had them really give us a shot, also give me a shot and believe in me, which was incredible. They didn't have to. It hadn't been done in my industry, in my space. We weren't an asset class. We helped these groups scale from 20 to 30 flips a month to some of these groups were doing 100, 150 flips a month, right? Went out, opened up these regional areas. I went out and lived in these places for 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time to understand how it worked, who was doing what. And it was one of the greatest challenges, experiences, you name it, of my life. And I loved it. But I was struggling to raise money as quick as my demand was, right? Because we really cared. We were really good. We were the little engine that could. So I thought, how can I take this challenge, because I'm hitting my head against a wall, to raise the type of money that I had the demand for, right? How am I going to do this in an industry that hasn't been done before? It's always been fragmented. How can I institutionalize this? How can I make this look more like a Wells Fargo, right? What I had seen, what I had exposure to. And I thought, let me open up a sister company where I am the person selling the assets, selling the foreclosed and distressed real estate. So the challenge with that was, in those days, they wanted you to come in and buy it as a portfolio. So if I'm having trouble raising a couple $100 million, imagine coming in and raising several, 4, 5, 600 million. That's like impossible. So I thought, let me figure out a better way. So I recrafted that to be an online auction model. So now I became that intermediary, if you will. So I was the person on my auction model, helping the banks understood what they had, selling those, creating sales and marketing strategies for each individual property, and connecting the real estate investors throughout the country to be able to have access to that. Later up, was able to expand that to everybody, anyone and everyone who wanted to invest in real estate was able to buy off of that auction platform. So we scaled that in a significant way, and had the good fortune to then say, okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to scale this. I'm going to move it. Teamed up with a gentleman who's had a company called Hudson and Marshall. So we merged those two companies together and sold that within 2 years to Fidelity, and 9 months later sold the lending company to Goldman Sachs. So it was definitely, you name it, I've been through it. I know what it's like to build it literally with a phone and a desk, and myself, where you're paying someone in gas money. I know what it's like to have no income. So you're, paying your employees off of credit cards. I know what it's like to raise the money. I know what it's like to be thrown out of a room because I don't look like the person on the other side. All of it, you name it, it got me to here, right? So my passion was always to be somebody that people could look to and relate to, that was a role model, that it was like, wow, she had humble beginnings and she was able to do it. She was able to put her mind in the right frame of mind to be able to accomplish this. Like I can too, right? To be able to be someone that my sons are proud of, that they could see. So that was it. That was how the journey began. And then I sold the companies, and then it turns out you have non-competes and you can't do this, you can't do pass go, you can't collect $200. So what do you do? And naturally, I started investing into other entrepreneurs where I could add value and where I could help them reach and create their goals and dreams and passions, and started learning other spaces and realizing that good business practices transcend all industries, and realize, like, maybe it's time to, of course, I built my own stuff. I can't help myself. I'm a glutton for punishment. So I build my companies all the time from the ground up. And my original team is still with me today after all these years. Everybody's grown up. We've seen each other through graduations, driver's license, marriages, deaths, children, you name it, marriages, divorces, everything, because we became that little unit, right? Through the trials and adversity and the joys, you really get to know someone's character. And we've just been very fortunate to all work together. And at this point, they don't need me, right? It's because we enjoy working together at this point. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm so grateful to have lived the things that I've lived, but it really came from a lot of just having that support from my family, with willing to be able to give me that exposure, right? Willing to be able to say, hey, listen, I may not understand, but I want the best for you.
That's amazing. I mean, your story is so remarkable in so many different ways. First, it's like I hear this. It's like it's your mindset. When I think about what does it take to believe in yourself so unequivocally, like just like it's a belief in yourself that's very cemented. For someone who's struggling with that first, and like even thinking that anything is possible, because I think what's really cool about your story is like when we explore these stories that are like, the really the American dream. You are the American dream, right? Parents of immigrants, you come in, you build your business, and then you have an immense amount of success with your business. You have a family. I mean, it is really the epitome of the American dream. Like for people that might be struggling with what I call like a victim mindset, what would you tell them? Like what would you say to someone who just has a hard time maybe they didn't come from a family where their dreams were supported, or where their visions seemed too big, right? For their background or for where they came from? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, figure out what you want, right? Like it doesn't need to be, I want to create a company that looks like this, but figure out what you want in life and for yourself, right? And then work backwards and figure out what it is that's holding you back. If it's truly that you doubt yourself, right? Okay, let's explore that. Why? Are you afraid? What are the experiences? But I think when you identify what it is you want, you're able to clearly see, I want that. And here is why I want it. This is my why. I want this for this reason. And then you're able to look at and say, why would I allow anyone to dissuade me from accomplishing that? Because so much of it is just the noise and the projection others put onto us. So look, no one is perfect. My family wasn't perfect. They're not, none of us are perfect. But what I did learn was if you want something bad enough, you have to be willing to tune out the noise. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have discernment of certain things that are positive that you can take. Most of what I've learned from other people, watching, listening, hearing, asking, right? But I'm able to tune out the noise now. It was not as easy then, right? Because you're young and impressionable. But I think you take a step back. Here's my goal. Here's what I want. And so I want this because of these reasons. There's your why, right? I want it for these reasons. So then you look at it and it's not as scary if that's what's holding people back. It's not as overwhelming, right? Because you can figure out that is the person telling me that I can't do it? Because there were many of those. Listen, it wasn't a walk in the park. I could tell you, I could do 15 more podcasts with you of all the negativity and all of the, arrows I have in my back, right? And it was really, how am I going to get to that because of my why? And why should I let this person slow me down? What have they done? Who are they? Are they paying my bills? Nope. So why am I listening to them? And when you can do that, you slowly start to build confidence, right? When you prepare yourself for stuff and you do one, you have another win and another little win and another little win. And you start to focus on those wins. Instead, we tend to normally focus on our losses and we tend to focus on the areas that we did poorly. I'll give you an example. I was speaking a couple of years ago to a group of seasoned entrepreneurs that have sold a company or two. Like that was like the premise of it, right? So these are people that have had success. And so we were going through it. And so I'm a big believer in writing things down. So one of the things I was saying is, okay, write down everything that you feel you struggled with as a business owner that you would have liked to gone back in time and fixed. And it was like, give us more time, give us more paper, more time, more time. Okay, on the other side, write down everything that you did right. And it was crickets. It was three things. I built a company, I sold a company. That was it. Two things, really. I have a fan. It was the most eye-opening experience because I'm thinking, wait a second, you guys are the American dream. You are like, and you're telling me you did two or three things right, but you want pages of all the things you did wrong. That is human nature, right? That is human nature. And I say in reverse, I say, okay, yes, we want to be aware of the things that we are challenged with, right? I'm very transparent on the areas and I will share them with you of where I've struggled and am struggling, right? But focus on the good things, right? Because if you do two or three things well, all you need is one, right? All you need is one win. That's it. And you can get that, but you focus on those things and you dissect that a little bit. Okay, I was able to do these things well because I put in the work, because I was organized, because I followed up, whatever the reasons are, and you focus and you do that more, right? Instead, so many times what we do is focus on beating ourselves up, which accomplishes nothing. So then if you already have that mindset, naturally you talk about that. So then others just, add to that. And you're adding fuel to the fire. And that's crazy, right? But if you can take a moment to just reflect and do it that way, that really helped me to really decide that I was going to be unstoppable. And yes, have discernment, figure out what you can take of that, but the rest, tune it out. It's just noise.
Wow, I love that because you're right. Many times what we focus on is the negative, and it's really like a mindset shift from focusing on, like, a lot of people focus on what they don't want, right? They spend so much time focusing on what they don't want, and then those things end up coming to be. Was the law of attraction, right? What you focus on expands. And right at the beginning, you started saying, from the beginning, I started focusing, like, to, your advice was focus on what you want, like figure out what you want instead of focusing on what we don't want, right? I think that's like number one. It's such an important thing. The other thing that I keep hearing from your words is that you also seem to be focused on like being solution oriented, whereas a lot of people that are not successful tend to be focused on problem orientation.
Right. And then they play the blame game, right? So then it's somebody else's fault. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying let's have discernment. Let's really identify what the challenge is, right? What is the challenge? And if you can start there and you can be honest with yourself, usually it's just a lot of self-talk of like, no, but, and I hear it because usually people want to be made to feel better, right? No, but I can't do this. And they give me 50,000 reasons of why they can't do something. They just told me who they are. They don't really want to put in the work. They don't really want to do it. They want to talk about how they want it, right? I'm not the person for that. I'm the person that if you really want to, these buts become objections. So let's figure out how to overcome each one. Okay, I can't do it, but this. Okay, great. Let's put some solutions on the other side of that page. Okay, I can't, but this. So if we can change it from just, I'm just talking about wanting something to, these are the real things I'm concerned with because that's real. These are the real areas I'm afraid of struggling in. Okay, let's come up with some solutions. Let's come up with some things we can do. That's what it takes to then put in the hard work, right? So really being able to shift that in ourselves, because a lot of times, to your point, we're products of our environment, right? We're products of hearing just a lot of complaints. Well, complaints and, that's not really going to get me anywhere, right? That's just more of the same. Whereas if you can really dissect, where is your complaint coming from? It's usually we're afraid of something, right? It's usually fear. So let's not be afraid to stare fear in the eye and say, okay, what am I afraid of? And for me, I'll give you an example. It was, well, I'm afraid of raising capital. Well, yeah, I should have been. I was very young going out to market. Can you imagine? Hi, my name is Trixie. I have zero experience in capital markets. I did not go to an Ivy League school. I didn't do all these things, but please give me hundreds of millions, just kidding, billions of dollars. Of course, I had every reason to be afraid. Oh, and Adam and I don't look like you, right? I'm not your normal CEO. Okay. But when I dissected, what was I really afraid of? Was I afraid of the rejection? Was I afraid that I didn't know how to do it? Okay. All right. Then go learn how to do it, right? Practice makes perfect. Go learn how to do it. Go understand the investor mindset, Trixie. Go figure out what they want to see. How do they want to see numbers? How do they want to see decks? Go expose yourself and be around it and become the best at it and become the best at your product offering so that you're speaking the universal language of money. Because I learned very early on, if you're making people money, it's a very universal language, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
learning that, but it came from me sitting with myself and saying, I'm afraid. Yeah, I had every reason to be afraid. Though that fear was valid. It wasn't that I was like ignoring it. No, it was valid. Okay. All right. So I don't look like everybody. Okay, but let me figure that piece out too. Let me make that a superpower. Okay. I don't have the background in the capital markets, but I will outwork everybody. Right. So let's identify what these real challenges are and let's identify what's just in my head. Right. And let's go through that, but prepare yourself. Right. And I spent years trying to understand and being exposed and, hey, can I come with you? Even if it had nothing to do with my industry, just to be able to be a sponge and learn and absorb.
Wow. And what was do you remember what your biggest fear of stepping into that room from all the things that you mentioned? Was it fear of rejection or fear of success or was it fear of ridicule? Like what were you able to pin? Do you remember what the biggest fear of yours was that you were able to say, okay, this is the biggest fear that is holding me back. And now since I know what it is, I'm going to face it.
Right. So I was afraid of not having an answer. I was afraid of coming across unprepared, right? And the reason I was afraid of that is because I spent all this time, years, getting out there, being the person that did every piece of the job, right? Like I was saying, whether it was answering the phone, originating, going to the borrowers, understanding, and I knew it. So my fear was not being able to articulate it in the way that was most effective for them to hear it. And then for them to ask me a question that I wasn't prepared for. And once I identified that, I went to somebody that whomever went to two or three people who were successful business owners to the level that I knew. I said, how did you overcome that? And what I learned was it wasn't that you had to have every answer. It was going as prepared as you can and be transparent because an investor wants to know the truth, right? So if you don't know something, be honest about it. Say, you know what? I'm not sure. I'm not 100%, but let me get back to you. And then go really find out and then really come back. And what I realized is people appreciated that more, right? Than me having every answer. And so that came with experience. That came with talking to others that had been through that because I was like, okay, I might know two investors, but I'm sitting in a restaurant stressing about this. Somebody had to put this restaurant together, right? Let me go figure out who that person was and find out and ask. So once I could do that, I could try and figure out the answers for myself. And once I realized, okay, I'll prepare as much as possible. I'll do the things, I'll do the 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it takes to know it, to know it well. But I need to understand what I'm up against. And once I could realize that my fear, although it was true and founded, There was a way to work past that fear. There was a way to work through that fear. And there was a way to use that fear to fuel me. So then at that point, when they didn't want to hear what I was saying, or I wasn't the right fit for them, I was able to absorb that I wasn't the right investment asset class for them. It wasn't a Trixie, we don't like you, you're not good enough, right? It was a, hey, we don't invest in that alternative type of investment, right? And so I didn't let it get to me. But that took kind of some self-talk too, right? That took like, okay, I can't take it personal. Like they can think whatever they want to think, but I know this makes money, so I'm not going to let that slow me down. I understand that what I'm doing might not be for everybody. Not everybody likes to eat cake. I might like cake, you might like cake, but 15 other people might not. And that doesn't mean that the cake isn't valuable. Once I could wrap my head around that, truly, it just rolled right off my back. It did not bother me one iota.
Wow. And what I'm also seeing though, also behind that is a lot of like work and action being taken, right? You were like, you talk about speaking to mentors and asking how they overcome it. And I think a lot that holds a lot of people back too, because some people are even afraid to go and ask for help, right? To ask for advice from others. And then you talk about preparing yourself, right? Taking that time, those 5 years that you're talking about to really understand an industry. So even though you have a dream and you have a vision for the future, you're like, okay, I need to put a lot of things into play and
Mm-hmm.
really prepare myself. Like you said, prepare myself as best as possible so that when
Mm-hmm.
I actually go and face my fear, I've done it to the best of my ability.
Right, right. And to know what you're walking into, right? Because for those 5 years, speaking about that, I still had to have my day job, so to speak, right? I still had to find a way to make money, right? Because you don't, at least for me, I didn't have the luxury of just figuring it out for 5 years. It was okay, life goes on. You still have, so I had opened, a mortgage office, right? A mortgage company in traditional lending. And that was a way that I, subsidizes my income while I was building this and preparing and learning and making these two worlds. So not being naive to the idea that there's a lot of hard work. So years and years and years, I was behind the scenes working, doing all these things. I wasn't going on vacations. I wasn't doing all of the things that people my age were, right? And that was okay. I knew I was building something, but I had to know what I wanted and what my why was, or you lose motivation, right? Because then you get tired and you feel sorry for yourself and you go through all these human emotions, right? And I remember, for example, being at a lunch with a couple of girlfriends that I thought were my girlfriends. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to get back to it. I'm, whatever. I said too much for who they were. I forgot who my audience was. I'm thinking, I'm so excited. I'm putting together a deck or whatever it was that I was doing, market original, whatever it was I was doing. And they were like, they like that just for whatever reason rubbed them the wrong way. They're like, well, we're going to go have fun and we're going to go do this. And I said to myself at that moment, they're not rejecting me. They're rejecting the choices I'm making. Right. That's okay. And I learned very early on that just because you want to keep moving and moving forward, everyone around you isn't going to want to. And that's all part of the growth. And that's okay. And you can't let that get to you because you look around 20 years later and the proof's in the pudding. Who's where and who's done what.
And also, I imagine that your surroundings, now the people that are around you have a very similar uh how do I say trajectory as you have been, or you have a lot of
Mhm.
things in common. Like you said, sometimes if you talk about something that might not be for the audience, that's why like the groups of people that we're with sort of change as we evolve and become other people, right?
Exactly. 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 And I learned that early on, thank goodness, and I was okay with it. Like I knew what I wanted, but that's why I'm saying like it's so important to figure out what you want your life to look like. And a business is a big part of that, or your career path is a big part of that. So identify what it is that you want. And of course, be flexible with it because life, continues to give you new opportunities. But I think that so much of it is if you know what you want. And look, I'm a big believer in mindset because it's my experience. I'm living proof that it works because, you know, there's so many challenges in business, right? Nobody's usually calling me to ask me how my day is going. They're usually calling me because there's a problem or an opportunity, whatever. What I have trained myself to see is what I think is reality. Every problem, there's usually a way to solve for it. Okay. Given these far extremes, like what we call acts of God, given those things, right? There's usually a way to solve for it. And if I have that problem, chances are others are going to have that problem too. So how do I turn it into a win today for Trixie and team, right? And how do I turn it into a win today or tomorrow for others? And then all of a sudden, you're looking at a new revenue stream coming in from solving a problem or a new business. I can't tell you how many times our businesses have grown leaps and bounds because of problems, because necessity forces you to, right? Necessity forces you to evolve your thinking. And if you can evolve your thinking, you have to evolve as a person, right? So it's constantly trying to almost like keep those two things in sync. Because if I'm over here as a person, acting like a crazy person, acting like, I'm 18 years old, my business is going to reflect that. Right. So like you kind of look at both of these and working them in tandem. And as you can kind of evolve as a person, you start to realize, wow, I am the business. I am worthy of investing in myself. Right. That starts to quiet all the negativity that we have of these tapes of the past. Right. Because that's really all it is, just tapes of noise from the past. We start to really see the reality of if I'm the business, I should invest into myself. I should have that, ability to have a workout. I should have the ability to, work and ask for my needs and talk about challenges. And all of a sudden it changes everything for you because instead of feeling terrible feelings that I see so many entrepreneurs dealing with shame and guilt and just fear. And it's all just this like soup, right? And I kind of tell them like, okay, take a step back. If it wasn't for you, there would be no business. So let's start there. Right? Instead of focusing on all these things, let's start with the facts. The facts are you are the business. So just like you invest in your employees, you're going to invest into yourself. And what does that look like for you? For me, I have to have time with my family. I have to have time for me. Like I like to get a workout in. Whatever the workout is, insert here, right? It's just that time for me is my moment. And those little things matter. So figure out what it is for you is what I always tell people. Let's work on what makes you feel better, right? And it could be something simple. It could be whatever it is that makes you feel fulfilled and completed as a person. And then you add on to that. Then you realize, okay, my circle, I want to learn from my circle. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to find a new room. I need to constantly be learning.
Wow, that's so true. And it's interesting because so many people turn away from problems, right? You're talking about like problems and how those problems create a more resilient company and you learn from those and you step up from there. And also not just they run away from problems, but mistakes are also what makes us more resilient. So it's interesting how two things that we can consider so negative, problems and mistakes, can be something that's just like an added bonus. Without those two things, there's like no strength to be gained.
Absolutely. I
Absolutely.
couldn't agree with you more.
Trixie, what is self-esteem for you? And is it unanimous to self-love?
I think you self-esteem and self-love are like muscles. You got to grow them, right? I think that a lot of people think that you're born with it. I think you grow with it. I think like everything in life, you've got to put work into it. And I think that if nobody sits down, or at least I don't sit down and be like, I'm going to work on my self-esteem. I think you start to realize the things that you do well. And I think you start to from there grow and accept that you are a human being. We are going to have our challenges. We are going to have our limitations. And I think being transparent with yourself on what those are, right, makes a big difference. For example, never ask me to be your navigator. I am the worst navigator on the planet. And that's even with like the map telling me, right? I still will find a way to get lost, right? So I know that. So why am I going to like sit and harp on that when it's something so minimal, right? But in the moment, if I'm getting lost and I'm like, but I have the navigation on, I still can't figure it out, I'm going to be frustrated with myself. Think of it that basic, right? It's the same thing. It's literally, okay, fine. If that's the worst thing that we're dealing with today, thank God, right? If that's the worst thing. And so I think when you put it in perspective to something so minimal like that, we can stop beating ourselves up and actually focus on the things we do well. You grow your self-esteem, you grow your self-worth, and then you start to demand that self-worth to be respected by others, right? But it doesn't just happen overnight. I think as you start to see yourself for who you really are, then you project it to others and then you start to finally absorb it, right? Because hearing it and absorbing it, two very different things. Someone can say, oh, you did a great job. And you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But if you actually feel like you did a good job, that's the win. To me, that's the win.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing like being proud of yourself. You can win a million prizes, but if you're not really proud of that, the prize doesn't really mean anything, or the award doesn't mean anything. But there can be
Right.
things in life that we do where we get absolutely like no trophy or no award that we just feel so proud of because we know we tried our best. We know we like pushed through. We know we like jumped 100 hurdles to get to. And so those are the things that really end up fulfilling us in the end. It's really interesting.
Exactly.
Um, let's talk a little bit about being a woman in a world that's really dominated by men still, right? I mean, I love it that there's more
Mhm.
and more women in the space of finance and the space of investment, right? How was that for you? And yeah, could you talk a little bit about that aspect, the challenge of being a woman in that arena?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many challenges, right? That again, it goes back to the challenge is real, especially it was for me coming up, 15 years ago, for sure. It wasn't like that. I'm not sugarcoating it. It's been real and we've gotten a lot better, right? Our society, there's room for improvement. Are there challenges? Were there challenges? Yes. Were there times that I was excluded because I wasn't part of the boys club? 100%. Were there times that, contracts were passed because I was a woman and maybe harder to deal with, meaning that you can't go to the same events. You can't go, you know what I mean? It's not the same. I wasn't going to get out there and golf and all these different things. So I quickly realized, if you're an inconvenience, right, it's less likely going to want to propel you. So I turned it around for myself and realized, okay, that might be the case there, but I am a woman. Let's focus on the things that I can do well. I can multitask, high emotional IQ, all these different things. I literally wrote it down. And I thought, okay, so let me capitalize on that. So I might not be the person that is going to go and join you on a boys trip, right? But I am the person that is going to facilitate A, B, and C, right? And I realized that that was just as important when you take a step back. If I got stuck thinking, poor me, I can't get to this A, B, and C, I'm never going to see all the things I can value over here. And at the end of the day, if you're bringing in ways to make money and you're bringing groups, just ways to make money, all of a sudden that has a value. So capitalize on that, tout that, make sure you bring that to highlight, right? So sure, anyone can go and golf or anyone can go out for drinks, but I can actually show you how to make money. Very big difference. And I wouldn't have seen it to tout it that way and to frame it that way if I didn't stop and like check myself in my thinking. Now, was it hard? Sure. I'll give you an example. There was a contract that I had been working on for a year. I haven't worked on anything for a year, like consistently, and gotten zero movement for a very long time. I was working on it for a year, and I'd go in and I'd meet with them in person, and I'm doing all the things. I'm adding value, showing them ways to make money, making them all these different things, right? Doing all the things I just talked about. And they weren't signing. And I was like, God, I've been going, they're taking my data, they're taking my ideas. Like I'm doing all the things, I'm providing all these value adds, and they're still not signing. What could it be? Could it really be something as shallow as that I don't look like them? No, we can't live in a world like that. These are my internal thoughts, right? And I said, all right, well, maybe I'm being naive. Maybe the world is still a little bit like that. So went to one of my clients. I said, hey, listen, you and I are friends. This is what I think is happening. I hope I'm wrong, but can you come in? Can you come with me to this meeting? I'll send a car for you. Okay. And just here, come be like the chairman, my advisor, whatever. Okay. Just come to this meeting. This person was a very well respected American dream, huge entrepreneur, gazillions of dollars, amazing, 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 right? All of the boxes were checked. Comes into the meeting, I say my thing. Within 9 minutes, they're signing. 9 minutes.
Wow.
There was my answer, right? Right there. I saw him have to frame the conversation back to me, toss the ball back to me 8 times in this meeting because they were like, oh, wise one, right? Yes, but she's the expert. However, she's the expert. He had to toss the ball back to me 8 times and they signed in 9 minutes. What does that tell us? So were the scales a little uneven? Sure. Did I learn the game? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, we won the game, right? We got it signed.
Wow. I love that. Because, there is power in admitting that a problem exists, right? There's problems in the world. But at the same time, not letting that hold us back and not letting us enter into this victim mindset where we make excuses for everything that's happened in our lives, and then we almost not we almost we self-sabotage ourselves because all we do is make excuses for the rest of our lives. I love that. I think that's like a such a powerful lesson, right? Something really to sink into our lives, because if we don't walk away from that and we don't empower ourselves, then we will always have an excuse to not make things happen in our lives.
Right. Right. And we let others dictate our life, right? Back to what it is that we want and what is our why. Are we really going to let someone else and their judgments or their thoughts or their fears, right, dictate how we live our life? No, we have to decide for ourselves what we're willing to accept and what we're not, right? And how we are going to accomplish what we want. And I think that hopefully, and that's not a story I normally share, but it's true. And that is really what happened. And I think that for me, if I can take that and share with someone else, that sometimes it has nothing to do with you, right? And other times it's just the way the world works, and you use it as your superpower, and you find a way and you look at all of the things, right? And so as a woman, look at all the things, look at all the plates we juggle, right? We've got 9 plates juggling at all times, right? The fact that we could juggle 9 plates is amazing in and of itself. So let's focus on the fact that we can juggle that. Oftentimes, people will try and make us feel like, yeah, you juggled 9 plates, but you dropped 1. Who cares? I was juggling 9 and I juggle 8 really, really well. How many do you juggle? Right? That's how we have to look at it. And then sometimes when it's just us behind closed doors, you think, okay, but are these 8, 7, 8 plates, however many, really necessary? And are they what I want? And sometimes as women in business, we forget that piece. We just do it because it's thrown at us. So I always say, stop, and you are the business. Is your time being best utilized doing A, B, and C? And is it really helping you get to your want and your why? And if it's not, just set it down for a minute. Nothing's going to happen.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I think a lot of us need to hear that.
Because we beat ourselves up about the dropped plate or 2. Maybe we shouldn't have been juggling it in the first place. Right. And so sometimes when we can focus on, look at the fact that we are juggling it so many and for so long, that's a unique skill set, right? That's not something that everybody can say they have the capability to do.
Yes.
It's something that we can do.
And to take full responsibility of our time, right? Because that's also an area as women that we can make excuses for, where we can make excuses for like, oh, I don't have time. But like, what are we doing with our time? Are we using
Right.
our time the way we want to? And why not
Right.
take full responsibility for the fact that we are the ones to decide what we do with our time? I think it's
Right.
such a powerful thing.
I agree. And that makes us really realize how empowered we really are with our time, with ourselves, with our thinking, and building off of that.
Absolutely. Trixie, thank you so much for being, I mean, seriously, I think I could talk to you for like 3 more hours. There's so many things that are, you have so many lessons, I think, that you can impart on women and people, obviously, but my audience is women, and I get really inspired by women like you who have gone off to do so many things, or I think who have overcome so many things that might set us off from our purpose in life. And I loved when you started talking in the beginning of the interview how you went back to your 3-year-old self, because I think a lot of us have that compass very clear when we're 3 years old, when we knew
Mhm.
what we wanted to do back then, and we shut off that inner child, and some people shut it off for life. And to be able to reclaim our inner child, sometimes we have to reclaim it a lot later in life, and to get
Mhm.
back in touch with our purpose in life, with what we really want. it
Mhm.
it's so powerful, and it's something I always talk that it's never too late, right? To reclaim yourself, to step into your self-confidence, your self-love, and to believe in yourself again. And yours is such a testament of believing in your dream, right? Believing in what you want and believing in your capability to see it through to the end. So thank you so much for being with us today. Can you please share with us where people can learn more about you, and anything else that you might want to share before we finish
Yeah,
up?
no. Thank you for having me. Truly, I appreciate it. I love what you're doing for women. I think it's incredible, and we need more women like you. So truly, thank you for what you're doing. I wish there were resources like yourself when I was coming up. So I commend what you're doing. And if I can ever be of help in any way, please consider it done. People can get a hold of me. I have a website, trixycastro.com. They can, I mean, I'm new to that whole frontward facing world, right? I've always been behind the scenes. So I'll keep everybody posted on there and on social on what I'm doing, businesses I'm investing into, businesses I'm growing, entrepreneurs I'm backing. And, you know, it's a lot of fun. I love it, but I'm an open book. If I can be of help to anybody, you know, would love to.
Awesome. And Mamacita, just so that you know, if you want to see her links, you can go to mamasconganaspodcast.com/228, mamasconganaspodcast.com/228. Thanks again, Trixie. I hope to talk to you soon
Yes,
again.
yes,
And
for sure.
reaching out for some investment
Yes,
advice.
yes,
I
for
love
sure. Thanks for having me.
women who talk about money because there's not a lot of, not enough of us yet that do. Woo, the world will be a better place when more money is in the hands of women. I do really truly believe.
Amen to that, for sure.
Okay, see you next week, Mamacita. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, it's Valentina Azara. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our motivational channel. If you have any questions or comments, visit our website at mamasconganaspodcast.com or follow me on social media at mamasconganas. And remember, don't be a mama con drama. Let's be mamas con ganas.